to our Arcan Zoom in, not drive in, but thank you all for coming and attending today and just spending time with us. Also, I know some of you might be on your quote unquote lunch break, so feel free to snack, eat, whatever you got to do to survive in the advising realm today. So we have a wonderful keynote speaker, and I will let Justin intro him, but I just wanted to say welcome and thank you all for attending today. And so I'll hand it over to Justin so we can get started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Martin. I am your Arcan Vice President for Communication. It is my great honor to introduce today's keynote speaker, Dr. Blake Johnson. Dr. Johnson has worked in higher education since 2002 and came to UAFS from the University of Wyoming. He's worked as an administrator in a coordinated effort to improve onboarding, retention, and student success for transfer and non-traditional students. At UAFS, Dr. Johnson provides leadership and oversight to the Division of Student Success and Retention, which houses our first-year advising, academic advising council, federal TRIO programs, academic success center, career services, student disability services, retention initiatives, workday student implementation, and academic program support. Please welcome Dr. Blake Johnson.
Thank you, Justin. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, welcome everyone. I'm actually going to turn my camera off so I don't look awkward in this. Helps a little better. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. My topic today is keeping advising relevant. And so this is definitely on the advising angle. I know that there are some here who may only have advising as a tangential role to the things that you do on a day-to-day basis, but I think you will still get something positive out of this, and I'm hoping you will. This is a perpetual question. Just institutionally, how do we stay relevant? How do we understand the changing times in a career landscape, the changing demographic needs of our students, the changing needs of our staff, of our faculty, of our administrators, of our communities? This is a topic you could honestly do every year and have a different person speak and come in with a different angle, because it's a perpetual question of how we actually do what we do on a regular basis. And I think that you will find oftentimes that this is a difficult topic because the more complicated our institutions become, the more diverse array of the concerns that we have, the harder it is to really find the right balance between doing things that are relevant and then as it relates to this topic, managing the kind of day-to-day transactional things that all of us have to do. And so that's something that I want to try to address today, is maybe some ways that we can try to do that. And there we go. So just a quick schedule. I'm going to give a quick bio. I'm going to spend some time looking at this term relevance and relating that into an idea of how we define student success. I'm going to spend a little time looking at specific barriers to retention. So if we're looking at success, what are some barriers to that success? And then I have, I think, 7 things that you can do personally and corporately on your teams and on your campuses to improve relevance and to stay relevant. And then I'll end by sharing some just different books and resources. So just a snapshot view of me. Justin said I'm Assistant Provost for Student Success and Retention here at the University of Arkansas at Fort Smith. And that includes first-year advising, but also academic success, career, 4 great TRIO programs, disability services, implementation of Workday like everybody else here in Arkansas, well, most of it is here in Arkansas, and then academic program support as well. This is hardly a job interview, but I am giving you just a little background on me so you know who I am and how I approach this. I've been in higher ed since 2002, and about 12 of those years in some kind of advising or academic counseling capacity or overseeing retention initiatives. So I do have some experience in that arena, and particularly with non-traditional students, transfer students, first-gen students, ESL, low income, and working on program development assessment, and have a strong interest in technology as well. Was part of a program in Virginia for 6 years where really got to work with a lot of historically underserved students, low income students, undocumented students, ESL students, and had a great privilege of leading an advising team and working in a really holistic, intrusive model, which I'll certainly reference today. And at my last institution, University of Wyoming, had the ability to restructure all of our college advising structures, implemented a master training program for advising. We launched a statewide academic advising network, not that different than what is here in Arkansas, and it implemented a number of different what we called advising conversations, mini conferences on different campuses that were really effective at kind of building some networking. So just a little background on me in that regard. So let's talk a little bit about this term relevance. Relevance can come forward in a lot of different ways, but I want to kind of focus on two. Globally speaking, what is the relevance of our institutions to students and their future careers? How do we fill that particular space? And then secondly, what is the relevance of advising to our overall mission of our institution? Those are two different questions. So the first really speaks to how do we relate to our students and the places that they want to go. The second is how do we relate to our broader institution as a whole, and how do we actually communicate, that particular relevance. And I would say that this is, my clicker's not working. I'd say that this is a difficult question because depending on the institution, and certainly looking at a number of different types of institutions nationally where I've done some work, the institutions can look at advising in primarily transactional roles. Now, there's nothing against transactions, and I'm hoping to communicate that today, that there are really deeply important critical functions that all of us need to perform to get students from A to B, to get them across the finish line. But it's not necessarily the reason why we signed up to get into student success and to work in advising. And we've seen institutions and divisions where advising was essentially a version of kind of a front information desk. And so if you have an issue or you're lost, you're not quite sure what to do, or you need to remember a deadline, or you forgot a form, the advisor is the person that you go to. And there's nothing wrong with that on the face of it, but the more that gets reinforced, the more it can actually limit what advisors are allowed to do, or the conversations that they are allowed to join, or the perceptions that students have about the effectiveness of advising at that institution. And one of the things I will say, this last point, students really don't have the knowledge, particularly first-gen students, of our structures to know if I have a question that fits into a career arena or a mental health arena or a social justice arena, who do I go to for that? And so the more that we get pigeonholed, the more it makes it difficult for students to know how they should be progressing. And it's really a question of place. So at your institution, what is the place that advising occupies? How would you characterize that place? How has that changed over the last 5 to 10 years? How has it changed as a result of COVID? How do you anticipate it growing or even potentially shrinking in the coming years? What place does advising occupy at your institution? And really, it's a question of how free are you to really shape the direction of the institution in your particular role with the functions and initiatives that you have. How free are you to really shape the direction of the institution as it relates to students? And one of the ways that I ask this may sound negative, but it's not, it's a question of need. What would our institution be missing if advising as it's currently constructed wasn't there? Now, this is a hypothetical summary, so you could say this is a straw man in some sense, but I've heard versions of this from admins over the years. So if advising wasn't there, what would actually be missing? And so the hypothetical response would be, well, students have to figure out a lot of the transactions on their own. There'd be more pressure on other student service offices. It would fall on teaching faculty to fill in more of those transactional roles. Now, teaching faculty, certainly we can have faculty advisors, but in a primary teaching faculty role or a research faculty role, advising isn't always at the forefront. And advising can quickly slip into those more transactional roles. We get the time of year when we need to do registration. We need to tell students how to pay their bill. We need to remind students of certain deadlines and how to understand placement into programs and completing different checklists and degree mapping and curriculum planning and finding their way around campus. And all of those are important functions. But the more that we lean into that, the more it can potentially inhibit our ability to connect and relate to students, particularly given how shifting their needs have been. So this is the conference presentation that was always meant to be, but never quite happened. And so many years ago, this was 9 years ago, I think I added up. I don't know if you count that as many, but I do. 9 years ago, I was working as an advising administrator with a program in Virginia. And I had several people on our staff who were counselors. They had gone through master's programs, they had LPCs or NCC certification, and they sometimes tended to approach things in a little bit more of a clinical way or a social work fashion, depending on their background. And what we noticed was that many of our students were coming in to talk about very transactional things, but they had bad attitudes, they had moods, they had other things going on around them. And so we decided to actually put in a conference proposal to ACA, to the American Counseling Association National Conference. And we put in a conference title and a conference presentation, and the title was Happy Hippo, Angry Duck, The Many Moods of Students, or something, Navigating the Moods of Students. I don't remember the exact title. And it was based on this book by Sandra Boynton. I had a 1-year-old at the time, and we were reading all of these different books, which are really creative and whimsical at times, just different looks at how you handle different situations. And so this particular book looked at trying to name the moods that students were in and name the moods that these different animals were in, sorry. Now, this was through the American Counseling Association, so it was a bit more counseling focused. And I was studying counseling in my doctoral program, and my 2 colleagues had licenses in counseling. So our initial conference presentation from a counseling perspective was, how do student moods and attitudes affect advising relationship? That was the angle that we took on that. We wanted to generate a conversation. Well, we had some logistical issues and we couldn't get to that conference. The timing just didn't work out. So we ended up reframing that entire presentation and shifting it over to an advising conference, a different conference that was a little bit later that we could actually make. And we changed the topic to make it not so counseling focused. And it was a little bit more like this: a discussion of the role advising plays to provide, quote unquote, something more, including helping students process reasons behind their decision-making, identifying barriers to student success, promoting holistic supports. We were very clear that this wasn't trying to turn advisors into clinical mental health counselors by any means, but it was trying to say, where's that space where advisors sometimes do something a little bit more beyond the transaction and need to provide a more holistic array of services. And unfortunately, it was turned down, and they got a lot of different proposals at this conference, so there's no shame in getting it turned down. But the responses from the reviewers were the things that actually really surprised me, because these were advising administrators. And I have 3 different responses here in terms of the reviewers who turned it down. As an advisor, I don't have the time or authority to do these things. Number 2, this approach does not match the philosophy of advising at our institution. Number 3, advisors at our institution are not supported or trained to approach advising relationships in this way. And I was honestly really surprised with that, because I thought the idea of presenting something holistic that would address a broader range of student concerns would be very relevant. But it wasn't received in that way, based primarily either on the philosophy and training of the individual who was advising or the culture of training and professional development at their institution. And so it comes back to this idea that we have this perpetual need to really define and frame what it is we do and what it is that we do of value. And I think that that's a particularly important question, because as we look at the types of climate that we're in now, where students are asking questions about value all the time, parents are asking questions about value, employers are asking questions about value. And we need to demonstrate that we do that quote unquote something more, that we offer students a broad array of services and supports, and we may not in an advising capacity occupy every potential need or support that student has, but we should be knowledgeable enough about those students that we can shift that conversation beyond the quote unquote transactional nature of advising. So that's the thing that I hope that is communicated most here today. And I say this to our teams. And so if you're from my campus, you've heard me say this most likely, that we need to be incredibly visible with the things that we do provide. We need to be visible to our campuses, to our students, to parents, and to different stakeholders in terms of saying, these are the full array of supports that we have on this campus. And even if I myself don't necessarily provide this particular service, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that students know about those services and are equipped to walk in and take hold of them for themselves. But I list some of the challenges here with it, with that type of approach. We have competing priorities and assumptions. We have financial constraints, as most of our institutions on this call do. We have uncertainty about enrollment. We have challenges with student social perceptions and things that they're posting online or things that they're hearing about their friends about our institutions, and really wondering about the overall value of what they're getting here. One of the things that I will talk about a lot, actually, let me come back to that in a second. One of the things I'll talk about a lot is just the way that higher ed is changing. And I'm not going to spend, I'll show you some books at the end, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that now. But higher ed has this need to continue reframing its value. And as competitors emerge, as different market dynamics emerge, it makes these types of questions about value all the more relevant. I was at the HLC conference about a month ago, and one of the things that was said is that at the current moment, we have about 6 million jobs that are unfilled in this country for bachelor's degree or higher. And in the coming years, sorry, hold on. System shutting down. In the coming years, in the next 4 years, that number is projected to grow to 11 million, meaning that there is a gap that is not being met based on the services we provide. When you look at companies like Coursera and all the different competitor Coursera knockoffs that are out there, they have really wrapped into this to a strong degree. They are becoming incredibly flexible and incredibly value-driven, saying to students, these are the particular types of services that we want to offer you. These are the particular types of courses and certifications. You can come in and in 6 months, have a certification and a credential to go out and land a degree. It's going to cost you $39 per month. And some institutions now are accepting those certifications for up to 18 credits of transfer credit. And there's no doubt that that has had an impact on our society. Coursera now has 92 million users as of last year. That far outweighs anything that higher ed is doing. In fact, it said actually within just since the pandemic, that number has grown by about 20 million. So they are finding ways to connect with students, connect with learners who are asking different types of questions. And it really should wake us up to say that we need to continually be ready to grow. And so one of the things that I think that I highlight often, and one of the things I think that can kind of be that central hub is how we define this idea of student success. There's a lot of different definitions of student success. I'm going to just list this as one definition, but I think defining it in this way to me is helpful when I begin to talk about this question of relevance. So this definition really focuses on the idea that we exist to connect students to outcomes. All of these discussions of faculty governance structures, of aid packaging, of institutional compliance, of budget decisions, of community engagement, and community economic development, all of it is secondary to the idea that we really need to exist to connect students to outcomes of value. So the full definition there, our mission as an institution of higher education is to connect students with long-term sustainable outcomes of value. That's really the reason we exist. And so whether or not a student has a good experience in housing, whether they have a good experience in different areas of our institution, those all could be valuable to that student, but those all could be valuable in the long run, but only if we can connect that with the things that the student is expecting to see in terms of their long-term goals. And so to get to that, we really do need to know what those student needs are, what their goals are, and how we can best align the structure of our mission to support that. And so with that, I say that there are some things that we need to know. This is certainly a partial list, but we need to be very aware of the student demographics and needs on our campus. We cannot assume that the students that we have on campus today are the same as the students that we had 5 years ago, that the questions that they're asking, that the degrees that they're seeking are the same as what they had 5 years ago, because likely there will be changes and we need to be adaptive to meet those needs. We need to know the current career landscape. We need to know career competencies and be familiar with that. And I have a story about that in a second. We need to identify best practices in learning. We need to be able to talk about barriers to retention. And we need to really begin to work on how we can communicate with diverse students. And I don't think it's any stretch to say that if the way that we communicate now has not changed in the last 10 to 15 years, then we are likely missing significant aspects of communication. If students have to come find a form on campus and look at a rack of forms and fill that form out and walk it across campus to turn something in, and that's the way that we are communicating information, that's likely quite a few years behind the times and behind the expectations that students would have in how they communicate in many other arenas of life. And so when I present this idea of student success, that we exist to connect students to long-term sustainable outcomes of value, I get two hypothetical responses, two different camps, if you will. And the first would say, you know what, say student success is important, but it's not really what I do. It's important, and there are people at this institution who do that, but what I do is different. And I'm not outing anyone, but particular pockets of campus, you probably can identify some on your own institutions who work hard and who do a lot of good things and who make impacts in their own way, but they do not see student success as a primary part of their role or their function. And what I even would say is that sometimes with these individuals, they'll say that the hard work in and of itself is what gives them the feeling that that institution has validity. And so they could put that effort into research, into athletics, into student engagement, into a lot of different things, but not characterize it as saying, this is what I'm doing to support a culture of student success here. And I think the further that gets away, the more difficult it becomes to stay relevant. The second group, though, would say, you know what, I value student success. I clearly see it as a part of my identity professionally. But when I defining it this way of saying, I'm going to rotate and shift what I do to connect with students and the outcomes of things that they value, defining it in this way and building programs that follow is difficult in this current landscape. And I would say that a big part of that is because we often in higher ed do not build the systems of support and professional development to really talk about things that go beyond the day-to-day functions of the transactions within our job. And so I'm going to pick out one of those areas to go back here a second, where I listed things that we could need to know. Student demographics and need, current career landscape and competencies, best practices in learning, barriers to retention, how to communicate with diverse students. Each of those could easily be their own conference presentation. You could do a whole series of workshops with staff discussing how we actually understand these things and implement programs to address them. But I want to just focus on one, barriers to retention, because I think it fits relevant with this topic for today. So if you've seen me present before, you may have seen this slide. This is actually at the dining hall here at UAFS. And I have a story from my previous institution where we were setting up to do new student programs in Welcome Week. We were actually planning it. This was back in February, maybe. We were talking about new student programs in Welcome Week for fall. And as part of that, we had to actually connect with our dining services staff because they were going to be putting on a lot of different food related events and things of that nature. And so we just wanted to meet with them for a while to go over the schedule and try to make sure that we were all on the same page. And we invited them into this large conference room. And when we got there, the dining staff proceeded to take over the meeting and for about 10 minutes lectured us on the idea of student success and that they played a significant and active role. And they said, we provide food and sustenance for students. We ask students how they're doing. If we see a student is down when they're picking up lunch, we ask them how they're doing. We ask them how their tests are going. We ask them what we could do to support them and get better. And everyone at that table was stunned because I will admit that none of us had really seen dining services staff in that particular light, but they got the mission and they understood that, yes, my job is to put food out and available and create a clean environment for students, but their job was something more. And their job was to actually feed into the life and culture of the institution because their idea of student success was shared. And so this is a definition from Lee Jones, who wrote this great book that's kind of difficult to find now, but you can see if you can find it, Retaining African Americans in Higher Education. But I like his definition. He says, retention is the continuous process to create, maintain, and support ongoing strategies for meeting the personal, academic, social, and financial needs of students to ensure academic success and graduation. Now, there's a lot there. There's a lot of pieces there. It's a continuous process. This is something that we are doing throughout. We are creating, maintaining, and supporting ongoing strategies. And those strategies are meeting personal, academic, social, and financial needs. So my question from that is, does your advising, does your student support reflect that? What is it you are doing in your capacity and institutionally to address the personal, academic, social, and financial needs? And how are you talking about those topics on a continual basis? And so with that, I want to introduce this model. This is a model I developed a couple of years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, to begin talking about just some of the barriers that students have when related to retention and to student success. And within this, I'm going to pull out a few data pieces and some nuggets that will bring some greater light to these. So cost, academic preparedness, sense of belonging, career applicability. I've done a fair amount of work on retention over the years and research on it. And these are 4 things that continually come to light as things that really all students need to address in order to justify persistence. And so nearly every student on our campus is going to have to address questions of cost, questions of academic preparedness, sense of belonging, and career applicability. And I want to use this as a way to talk about relevance here today. So with this, I want to point out just a few nuggets on each of these. Cost is something that typically can be considered the most common and significant barrier to completion. 51% of students who drop out do so, because of costs. Prices for undergraduate tuition and fees and room and board have gone up significantly in the last years, and they're only going to continue rising, particularly as appropriations and things like that are cut and tax revenues are cut. Those numbers are only going to continue going up. With that, point 2, student loan debt has gone up substantially on, looking at congressional relief and things of that nature. But the bottom line is that students are borrowing substantially more than they were in the past and not able to pay it off in the same amount of time as they were in the past. 85% of students at 4-year institutions report that financial aid is necessary for them to make progress with their degree. If you go back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that was not the case at all. People were paying out of pocket for institutions and loan options were very limited. And in a study of 11,000 high schools, only 16% of high school students currently were required to take financial education. This was a big study that was done recently. I don't remember exactly when, within the last year or two, meaning that a lot of high school students weren't getting a good foundation of knowledge for financial preparedness, and it kind of exacerbated issues under the umbrella of cost. Academic preparedness refers to the sense in which a student is not only ready for the process of learning, but is empowered with the right resources, materials, and intentional supports. 49% of college students report large gaps in one or more subject areas, and 83% of college students report at least some gaps in one or more subject areas. And the idea behind this is that we have encouraged a broader array of students going to college who back in the day, whenever that is, weren't necessarily going. They were taking time off after high school, getting into career, beginning families and things of that nature. But we are creating avenues through financial aid and through early awareness programs and bridge programs and supports to get more and more people in the door. But 83% of students are reporting that there's at least some gaps in one or more subject areas. So they're getting in the door, but there's still that difficulty of saying, I actually belong here on an academic level, and I'm ready for the things that I'm being asked to do. 60% of college students say they would have worked harder in high school if they knew what they knew now about what they know now about expectations of college and the working world. And then more than 1/4 of graduates surveyed wish that their high school had done a better job preparing them for success in key areas, including study habits, communications, and math. So giving you another area where kind of doing quote unquote something more is immediately relevant to students that we serve. Sense of belonging has been in the higher ed lit for a long time, really since probably the 70s, I would say, some maybe earlier, but certainly Tinto's work in the 70s and 80s. And it has not died off. It is still here and active, and looking at ways that we can, quote unquote, communicate in engaging, welcoming, respectful, and inclusive environment. And it's something that we need to continue addressing on an advising student success focus. So recent large-scale study on belonging among college and university students, this is out of Stanford, higher rates of personal and academic success, better persistence into the second and third years, lower levels of mental health issues. And a study also found that at two-year institutions, females reported a much higher level of belonging than males. And we've certainly seen this in a number of different academic areas where females are outpacing males, and nothing against females advancing certainly, but we are potentially missing something with those male students who aren't feeling like they are connecting, who don't feel like this is the right environment for them, and end up going to the world of work and leaving the institution. And then the last one here is career applicability. This is something that I've worked in this space for a while, former career counselor, and have a lot of passion for career applicability. And career applicability speaks to the long-term value and relevance that students perceive from their effort. And really asking this question is all of this worth it? Is all of this worth it in the sense of saying, I'm going to school for however many years, I'm taking time away from work, time away from family, time away from all the other things that I could be doing, and what's the end goal? What does that look like? This idea that students want to be well-rounded is really dropped off significantly. That's kind of an old Ivy League myth. It kind of continues to perpetuate that students really want to be well-rounded and want a sense of accomplishment. Fundamentally, students want to know that there's value in what they have here, and that it's going to lead to a job when they're done. And so institutions nationally under increased pressure to demonstrate the value of their degrees. Career service initiatives are rarely tracked or integrated within other curricular or co-curricular programs, and low career applicability can be connected to high transfer out rates. And I had another point down here where I listed some specific transfer out rates for institutions, but I took that out because I didn't think that was, it would be too much of a rabbit trail right here. But you can look up the transfer out rates at your institution, and there will very likely be a strong relationship between whether or not those students feel there is career applicability at your institution, or whether they are finding that at another institution. Because when we look at this model, it's not so much that they're struggling with cost or they're struggling with academic preparedness because they're actually still enrolled at another institution. It's the function of them thinking there's another institution that's going to offer me a better path forward into my future career. And that's the reason behind their decision to transfer. Now, I said I was going to share a quick story about career. I was doing some work with an institution of maybe 2 years ago, right around the time I actually came up with this model. And I was doing some consulting work with this institution. And during a talk, they ended up having a debate. It was actually kind of a one-sided debate, them against me, which it turned into, because they were actually very against the idea that advisors were even talking about career. On one hand, you had career counselors and career service personnel, some who had had counseling degrees or even counseling licenses, and they felt that career was really in the domain of a clinical approach with really in-depth assessments and long-term therapy, if you will, to try to focus on how students are being counseled through major life decisions. On the other hand, I had all the advisors, and the advisors essentially reiterated what I brought up earlier. We don't have the time, focus, or training for this. We're not allowed to do it, and so we don't want to do it. And there was this really sharp divide because I felt like career was such an important, critical aspect to why students are walking onto our campus. And to see advisors actually saying, we don't really occupy that particular space here. If a student wants to talk career, they can go make an appointment with the career services office. And I thought that was a missed opportunity. I don't think that advisors should be replacing the services of the career services offices, but certainly to just kind of put a blanket statement out saying that's not what we want to be doing. That sends a wrong message, I think, to students in terms of the relevance that those advisors have to student success. One last thing I want to mention on this is a great book, and I have a book list coming up here in a couple of slides I'll show. I think it's important that we approach retention with an outcomes first perspective. And that's one of the main takeaways from this book. This is a challenging book to read. And one of the reasons it's so challenging is it says very clearly that our intentions are not that important. Our effort is not that important. How much we love our services, how much we love our traditions, how much we love the things that we do. None of that really matters. At the end of the day, we are really judged based on outcomes. If you love your services, but they aren't producing relevant outcomes for students, then those services aren't of value. If you love the form that you use that students fill out and students can kind of get in and figure it out, if you love the technology or appointment software that you use, but students are struggling with it, then that's something that we need to assess. And this is something that's been difficult for me because like a lot of us, we work hard. We put a lot of effort into the types of things that we do, but sometimes those efforts do not produce equal outcomes. And we have certain pockets of students who just simply may not relate. They may not connect. They may not feel that your communication is really getting to the point where of the things that they need. And so the more that we can kind of approach things from a reverse direction, saying what are our actual outcomes and how are we shifting our programs and services and training and structure to match those particular outcomes, the more that we do that, the more likely it is that we're going to be connecting with the students and making more relevant decisions. Okay, so I said I was going to give you some things that I think advisors can do to stay relevant. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I think these are things that probably many of you are doing and are things we need to continue to do in order to stay relevant. So the first is to define the role, purpose, and scope of advising. And I think we need to recognize the assumptions that come in with advising to clarify at our institution what is really important, what's really necessary, and to codify how things are going to get done. And I am a big believer that this needs to be public. This is not something that we should assume that people really know who we are. People have assumptions about advising. People have assumptions about student success. We need to lead the narrative on those assumptions. We need to let people know all the amazing ways that we are there to help students and to help faculty, help staff, help administrators, and make their lives easier. So that's number one. Number two is to train, support, mentor, and empower advisors. And I've listed every year because I think this needs to be in the regular cycle and process. I've been at institutions, and when I started, had advisors come up to me and said, I have not had meaningful professional development in years. And that was disconcerting to me because that's never been my MO. And I felt like something was missing in that regard. And the more that you tail off on professional development, the more you miss the opportunities to connect with an advisor on a deeper level and support them in things that may be far outside of the scope of what they really do on a day-to-day basis. And that's a missed opportunity. And so I think advising needs its own systems of professional development and mentoring. And really, I don't think we can assume that that's automatically going to happen from other entities at the institution because they're going to have their own assumptions about the role of advising and the scope of advising. Number three, collaborate, network, and co-create. And this is something that we do a fair amount here and have done at other institutions to try to make sure that advisors are actively engaged and involved in different initiatives at the institution. I will say up front, this takes planning. This takes a great deal of coordination to make sure that you have time for it and that you have the appropriate training to do that. But there are so many services and initiatives and programs going on at our institutions, and there's literally no reason I can think of that advisors can't be involved in every one. If the way that we are defining student success is that we are there to connect students to outcomes of value, who better is going to know that needs of students than advisors? Because advisors have the ability to occupy that particular space. There's no reason that a quote unquote administrator who doesn't necessarily lead with student first perspective should be the only voice directing the traffic at the institution. And so when we look at different types of initiatives, I want advising staff sitting in those conversations, whatever their role, however significant they think they are at the institution. A frontline advisor has every capacity to lead and direct and support. And so we've done things that my last institution, we created a faculty learning community for first generation initiatives. This was to pull faculty together to talk not about their content, but about the needs of first gen students. And we had active professional and faculty advisors in there leading conversations to talk about their own experiences as first gen students or their experiences working with the needs of first gen students. And it was highly effective. And I have many other examples of things like that we've done. The fourth thing is recognize good practices and be visible. One of the things I say a lot is we really can't oversell our need to be visible in the things that we do well. We need to build platforms really where recognition and visibility can happen regularly. And one thing that I say a lot is that you need advocates outside of your office who know the value of what you do and can communicate it on a real level. Many people will have an assumption, oh, sure, you can go to this office and they will help you with these particular types of tasks, but do they actually really know you in the full array of services and supports and structures that you are able to provide? And how are they getting that information? How do they know the positive things that have happened over the last semester? Is it a newsletter? Is it a social media post? Is it a TikTok video? What things are we doing to continue celebrating the role of advising at our institutions? Sorry. Fifth is commit to learning. I think higher ed is an amazing space, and it's filled with talented people who are educated and who are, surrounded by resources and all sorts of ideas about best practices. And I think we really just need to take advantage of this. We need to read as teams, as groups. We need to take courses together, or attend webinars. We need to talk about how we are developing our strengths and honestly admitting where is it we still need to grow. People often assume that professional development, I think, has to be really expensive or time consuming. And the reality is it doesn't. It just has to be a priority. Carving out some space on the calendar to say, we're going to take a lunch hour to talk about this topic. And we're going to meet, we're going to get to know each other, we're going to support each other, and we're going to try to see if there are things in this that we can do to grow and to improve. That doesn't even have to cost anything. It just has to be a priority. Administer advising effectively. And so one of the things that I will say as it relates to the transactional side is that there really should be no room for sloppiness. And I think all of you would probably agree with that. The better that we can plan and coordinate and establish good structural processes, the more room that frees up for us to support students in a wider range of roles. I say do an inventory every month of how you spend your time. If you get to the end of the month and say, well, here's all the things I wanted to do and here's all the things I actually did, you're going to have a better sense of where you need to grow, what you need to shift, what you may need to minimize, or where in the annual calendar you need to prioritize things a little bit differently. You can certainly modify, processes as you go. The last thing I'll say is dig into data. And this is another area where I've seen advisors and talked to advisors who felt that they didn't really have a solid platform to know what the data was, how they could understand it, how they could apply it, how they could do something as a result of it. And I think it's imperative that we create opportunities for advisors to collect, review, and act upon data to build good relationships with our IR offices, or depending on how busy they are, to collect your own data, to go out and collect quantitative and qualitative data and do some focus groups, assessing advising services, but there's no reason it has to be limited to that. Assess the overall culture and climate of the institution, and that can start right in the advising office. Okay, said I was going to give you some books. I'm going to give you 6 books. I make zero money off of any of these, so these are just ideas that I had, but I think these would be beneficial for you if you want to check them out. Relationship education really talks about this idea that this environment is inherently relational. And first and foremost, it is not about students coming in to get information. It is about developing people through relationships. It's a really interesting book. Equity Talk to Equity Walk, as I said, I mentioned just a bit ago, looks at different practices within higher ed to recognize where disparities are. And if you approach things from an outcomes first perspective, you're going to begin seeing disparities in a different way, and hopefully that leads to different types of programs to match those disparities. The Years That Matter Most is a really interesting book looking at the basic idea that college now is essential, and the transformations that go on within that environment are things that last for life. There is life after college. I got to meet Jeff Salingo a year or two ago, right when this book came out. Really interesting look at the landscape of higher ed. And it's very similar to the last book by Arthur Levine and Scott Van Pelt, The Great Upheaval, looking at a lot of the data just about how things have changed nationally in terms of the scope of higher ed. And then in that, John Braxton's book, really a classic kind of for retention, looking at new ways to approach student retention. Okay, I'm going to finish here with 6 questions of application and then just a final takeaway. So these would be things if this was a workshop where we'd sit down and go through, and I'll send out these slides later. But are we creating space for students and advisors to engage in significant conversations? How are we doing that? Question 2, are advisors involved in significant conversations at the institution globally? If we're doing a strategic plan or mission, vision, values, what is the role of advising in that plan? Question 3, is there a culture of support to validate and grow the delivery of exceptional advising at the institution, and who leads that? Question 4, is there regular and meaningful networking among enrollment, academics, and advising? Question 5, are our interventions proactive or are they retroactive? I would also say, is our data proactive or retroactive? Question 6, are advisors actively involved in collecting and evaluating data on student needs and performance? So I want to leave you just with a few thoughts here. And I will say up front that, advising can certainly be too holistic. So this is one side of the conversation, so to speak. Advising could ignore all the transactional elements and you end up putting out fires every day because things just weren't getting done. And so I want to emphasize that. We offer tremendously valuable services and transactions are very important. But in my mind, they open doors for more significant things to happen. And the more that we are aware of student needs, the more we are aware of where students are headed into a career landscape, the better we can shift what we do to move beyond those transactions and connect with them on a little bit deeper level. And so I want to say the point 2 there, it is possible to provide effective transactional advising and still not meet students in the place they need. And that's challenging. That should challenge all of us to say, am I working hard or am I actually connecting students to a place of value? And I think the advisor offers tremendous value because they're one of the entities that really can offer something more. Advisors need to know almost everything at the institution. They cannot be specialists. They are generalists, and they need to be specialists about everything, I guess you could say. I mean, they really do need to know so much about the institution, but they occupy that space where students do get to know them and students can ask questions, and we can move narratives forward to support students in need. And with that, I am done. I will send out these slides and I'm happy to take any feedback you have later, but I'm going to turn this back over to Justin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. We really appreciate you being here today and appreciate you speaking to the ARCAN membership and those of you who are not ARCAN members. I am going to go ahead and pass off to Danielle.
Thank you again, Dr. Johnson. We appreciate you. And if you will send that, you could just send your slides to me or Justin and we'll send it out to everyone. And this recording will also be posted online. So just some kind of round robin updates from our different officers. I will have Shanna Turney, who is our treasurer, just give us an update on our monies that we have in our account from ARCAN.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. If you're not an ARCAN member, welcome. We're glad you're here, and we hope you will consider joining us next year. Right now, our budget, or our account, I should say, has increased by a little over $200 since we met last time. So with more memberships are coming in, so we're looking good. Our balance right now is a little over 11,000.
Awesome. Thank you.
I did notice that the pins have been paid for. I'm not sure if Justin has received those yet or where those were sent to, but that does look to be all in place.
All right, so with that, thank you, Shanna. I will turn it over to Pam. She has some announcements about membership.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you are on the call and not a current member and would like to join ORCAN, we are accepting memberships for the 2022-2023 year currently, and I'll post a link in the chat box so that you guys can join. And if you are a current member, membership renewal will be also starting as well, and you'll receive those emails if it's your time for your renewal. You'll receive those emails within the next week or two, and it will also include the link to join. And so if you have any questions about membership, if you're a current member, if you paid your dues or anything like that, you can send an email to membership@arcaninc.org or our treasurer at arcaninc.org. And either one of us can assist with finding out whether you're a current member or if your membership is in renewal. And that is it.
Awesome. Thank you, Pam. And then Justin, our VP of Communications, I will let you talk about the hard work that you have done this year.
Thank you. So before I do that, I'm going to drop something in the chat. So you just heard Pam mention that email address and the arcaninc.org. So for those of you that have been with Arcan for a minute, you'll notice that is not arkansasadvising.org. What the heck is happening? So we actually spent this past year visiting what is Arcan, what is it for, why is it here, what does it exist for? I mean, really rebranding ourselves to bring ourselves to current, where we're at, what we do. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all for just one moment. Let's see here. So y'all don't see all my messy emails. Okay, where did that go? Let's see, everything is on top of it. I'm so sorry. Okay. So here's our Arcan homepage. Danielle, can everyone see that? Okay. Okay, perfect. So you'll notice that it looks a little bit different than the previous website. We have rebranded with a new logo. And one thing you'll notice throughout the website, and if you follow us on any kind of social media, you'll notice it there as well, is through Arcan. Of course, there's advising, but with advising comes FERPA and everything like that. Can't always share students. So something we want to highlight is the beauty of the natural state. That's where we live. That's where all of us do all of our advising. And so we also want to highlight the beauty of our campuses within the natural state. So you'll see this dedication down here on the main part of the website that talks about made up of wonderful members from wonderful campuses across the state. And as you navigate the website, you'll notice that the header will change and represent different institutions. And so one of my favorites, and I'm partial, is the Arcan blog, which highlights the UAFS campus. But if you go to the Join Arcan, you'll see it's the A State campus. And so there's a ton of different options. And then the other main thing I really wanted to highlight besides the website, which I'm pleased with greatly, is we have tried really hard to have a higher social media presence. We recognize that you are busy 8 hours a day. Advising is difficult and it can take up a lot of your mental space. And so we want to be in your social media where we want to come to you. We don't want you to have to, actively seek us. So you're more than welcome to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is new this year, along with Instagram. But you can follow us in any of those locations. And we will do our very best to share information as it comes relevant. Any of you that follow us saw we did a few posts leading up to Dr. Johnson speaking today. And then something that Danielle's going to talk about here in just a moment is the Outstanding Professional Advisor of the Year. But definitely give us a follow on all your social. And if you have any questions, you can always reach me at communication@arcaninc.org. It was wonderful to see you all today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justin. And we all appreciate how much you have worked to update the website. And I will just throw myself under the bus because I text Justin even after hours. And I'm like, hey, can we add this? Or hey, can we do that? So poor Justin, I have been like poking the bear all semester, like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And he's just been great. And so I definitely am thankful for your hard work as well as the rest of the board this year. And so I know that Jenny is still on. So I and Jenny is our past president. And to just contain all of our emotions on the exec board, Jenny, if you'd like to say something, you're more than welcome to, but I do want to give you a big thank you of just how much you have kind of, guided a lot of us over the years. And I am thankful to not just call you like my friend or like my colleague at UCA or my friend at UCA. I don't remember if I told you I gave somebody your email at the mall because they were planning on going to UCA and they're an incoming freshman. I was like, this is my girl. Like, if you have questions, ask Jenny. So I just want to say thank you so much for just being on the board for several years. I think this is your 4th consecutive year. And so we're going to let you have some time off. And then when you're ready to come back, please come back. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for just your dedication to Arcan and just advising as a profession and just being a sounding board sometimes to all of us. So thank you so much for that. I definitely wanted to recognize you for that today. And if you'd like to say anything, you're more than welcome. But if you want to.
Well, thank you all. I've served on Arcan for 4 years, and I just can't say enough wonderful things about the organization. I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity or are interested, we have elections that I think we're going to talk about. And it's just been a joy to meet so many just fellow advisors on all kind of on the same pathway and making those connections in the state. And so thank you for just embracing me, and I'm just look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thank you, Jenny. And so a few other kind of announcements, updates for you all, and then we will give you the time to leave. So just something that Shanna had mentioned, and I apologize if you cannot really see it up here, but all of the members from this year and then going forward, we have ordered little like Arcan pins that say like Arcan on them, and their little lapel pins. So we will be sending those out to all of you at your institutions throughout the summer, and then new members, whenever they join, they will be getting that. So that's just something to kind of give you guys as a token for saying thank you for being a member, and then just thank you for your participation, especially, in the last couple of years where things were all virtual. And if you know me, I say cuckoo bananas a lot. So it's been cuckoo bananas. And so thank you for just your participation and your activity within Arcan and coming to our virtual events, in the spring of 2023, we hope that we have a drive-in again so we can all see each other and then, like embrace and hug or fist bump, whatever, you feel like you would like to do. So looking forward to that. And then we will be sending out calls for nominations for open vacancies on the board. So we will have the treasurer open, the secretary open, our VP for diversity will be open, and then our 2-year public and our 4-year private institution. And you can see that on the website, and Justin put it in the chat. So thank you, Justin. If you would like to nominate yourself, you're more than welcome to do that. If you like to nominate someone else, you're more than welcome to do that. But we'll be sending a lot of that information out as well. And then for the Constitution, we've been working this past year a lot back and forth to update it. And so as members, we will be sending that out probably in the next month or so to vote on just updates before kind of the end of the academic year for all of us. So know that that will be coming in your email as well, just updating mainly to stay relevant, because I'm that person that looks at a document. If it says 2 years ago, then I'm like, something's changed, we need to update. So the UFS people love me for it always. And then the last thing that I do want to talk about is the Outstanding Professional Advisor of the Year Award. That nomination is open until May 20th, and you can access that on our new website. But if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the exec board members. You do have to be a member to be nominated. So if you're not a member currently, think about it in the future for sure. But we will be reviewing that, and then we will send out an announcement as to who gets the Outstanding Advisor of the Year. So that's really all that we have. I know we ran over a little bit, so thank you for hanging out and staying on with us, but we thank you so much for your participation with Arcan this year. And then just an FYI, Zach Singleton is our president-elect, so I will move into past president, and then I'm going to be like Jenny next year with like all of my emotions. And so if you have questions, please always feel free to reach out. But we thank you again for your time today and hope you have a good rest of your week and a good weekend. And, yay for summer and orientations, but the life of an advisor. So thank you all and have a good day. Have the best day available to you.